Welcome to this special program coming to you from Africell. I have a guest today, Ambassador Joe Abbas Pham. He's a special friend of Sierra Leone and indeed a friend of Africa. He's a former senior United States government official, and between 2018 and 2021, he served as the United States Special Envoy for the Great Lakes and the Sahel regions in Africa. He's a distinguished fellow and former Vice President for Research and Regional Initiatives and Director of the Africa Center. In September 2020, he was accorded the personal rank of ambassador, becoming the first Vietnamese American to achieve that rank. Ambassador Pham is the author of more than 300 essays and reviews, and author, editor, or translator of over a dozen books, primarily on African history, politics, and economics. He recently joined the Africell Group as a non-executive director. Make welcome, Ambassador Joe Abbas Pham. Ambassador, welcome to Sierra Leone.
Thank you very much.
And this is not your first time in Sierra Leone.
No, it's not, but it's been too long. My last time here was 18 years ago.
Had it ever occurred to you that you were going to be back in Sierra Leone for anything? Because there was no longer any war. The only reason why we were here related to the war, we had peace, everything was settled.
I hadn't been here in almost 2 decades, was in fact a tribute to the peace and security that this country's enjoyed. So I'm grateful and gratified that there was no need for me to visit in a professional capacity, but I'm delighted to have the opportunity to be back and to witness firsthand the progress that's been achieved in the intervening years.
As a young boy, you grew up in Vietnam. How did you have to move, your family had to move to the United States of America, and you said you were age 5. Can you just go back to that history and roll out the journey?
Certainly. I was actually, my parents were from families that were officials of the South Vietnamese government. Right. In fact, I was actually born in Paris while my parents were stationed there. But I spent the first years of my life in what was then Saigon, now Ho Chi Minh City, in South Vietnam. But when the Vietnam War came to an end, and having been on the losing side of that, my family had to leave South Vietnam and became refugees in the United States, immigrated there, and I grew up in the Midwest of America.
And given how far away you're coming from, in Asia, in Vietnam, and most of your life is about what you've been doing with your work in Africa. Does it have to do with the war that was in Vietnam and Africa and stuff you've been doing? Let's talk about how you got connected with Africa. The reason I'm asking this is because you've worked extensively in Africa, covering every region in the continent, monitoring elections. You're working on issues related to peace and justice and violent extremism. You've written books about Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Somalia. In 2017, you wrote a strategy paper titled A Measured U.S. Strategy for the New Africa. This caught the eye of the then President of the United States of America that led to appointments that you had subsequently. Where did this fascination with Africa come from?
Well, it started out in a seemingly banal way, but the truth, Joe, is often very much like that. I had a fascination with wildlife as a youngster.
If you reflect on these years you've spent in Africa, which event across the continent would really stand out in your mind for whatever reason?
Contributed in a modest way to the first ever peaceful constitutional handover of power in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And then most recently, I served as the U.S. Special Envoy for the Sahel region of Africa, trying to help a very complex crisis of security, not just in military terms, but human terms in West Africa.
And there's actually a correlation between the raising the quality of life of people and maintaining and keeping peace. And tell me about that correlation.
Telecommunications is part of that building up of development and opportunities to keep people connected with each other, to keep governments connected with civil servants and ordinary citizens, to empower people with knowledge.
This is not your first connection with mobile phone companies in Africa. Indeed, you were at some point in time, even as an academic, providing advice for Millicom International, and interestingly, Africell in Sierra Leone bought over Millicom, bought over their operations there. So the connections have been coming.
But to provide counsel and advice on dealing with political risks and with some of the challenges with engaging with communities. I firmly believe that business has a social function and a social responsibility and commitment to working with communities to contribute to their development, so that it is indeed a win-win proposition.
In an era where people think it's just tokens, some further question I'll ask you down, but how deep is this in your DNA, given the work you've been doing in Africa, and how does it connect to what you know Africell has also been doing wherever we've been operating in Sierra Leone and in places which, of course, I think would have been a reason why you would say, yes, Africell, I want to work with you. You know, what's there in the DNA that connects?
It's a company that I know its leadership, its founder, Mr. Ziad Dalou, who shares that passion for Africa, for its development, and for the social role that businesses have and enterprises have in not only doing well for their shareholders, but doing well for the larger stakeholder community that they operate with.
So, Ambassador, having taken this role to be part of the non-executive directors of Africell, what's the major contribution you see you bringing on board?
My experience, my knowledge that comes from 3 decades of work across this continent, a continent that Africell has made a special commitment toward, a strategic view over the long haul, and some very shared interests.
And you shared about collections you've made of artists in Africa. Tell us a bit about that.
I've long, I started like many young people who work in Africa, collecting what might be called ethnographic art, folk art, and I've got a fair number of that, but I very early on began being interested in the art scene and the messages that one could have from especially the visual arts in particular. And so I began collecting relatively obscure young artists whose work just appealed to me on an aesthetic level.
Any ideas about Sierra Leone that you're actually looking out for, of things you're going to do in that arena?
There are some very interesting initiatives that Africell is undertaking here, and I'm looking forward to seeing those brought to fruition and how that's going to elevate the visibility of young Sierra Leonean artists.
But on a wider level, what do you think, how do you see Africell contributing to the development of wider telecoms in Africa, which would be important?
One of the most attractive things, when I first met the chairman of Africell, Mr. Ziad, one of the things I found most attractive was his willingness to bring the state-of-the-art technology and invest for the long term in some markets that were not perhaps the primary markets or the markets that other outside investors look toward first. And to make a great success of it, not only for himself and for the group, but also for their customer base.
Ambassador, this is the final lap we're running through now, and we want to talk a little about faith issues. I read that you're also an ordained Episcopal priest.
Yes, I'm an ordained priest of the Episcopal Church, the Anglican Church. And I think it gives me another dimension. And I think it's a dimension that many Africans understand. Unlike perhaps Western societies or other more secularized societies, the importance of faith in not only individual lives, but in the lives of communities and nations.
How do you hope to stay engaged in Africa? With issues of governance, peace building, and those things that you've been passionately championing. How do you hope to continue?
Well, I've had the privilege of working on these issues as an academic, working on them as a policy analyst and a think tank scholar, working on them as a high-level diplomat, and now working on them in the private sector, working with Africell and other companies I'm involved with. But who knows what the future will bring? I certainly will remain engaged in these issues from a variety of angles. Now, not only the business side, but I'm also back at the Atlantic Council, the think tank where I was formerly vice president and head of the Africa program. I'm back there as a distinguished fellow, so I continue writing on some of these issues. I continue hosting events and discussions, and certainly looking to the future, I'll remain engaged with both Africans in Africa, Africans in the diaspora, and with policy discussions globally that affect this continent.
What we have that is common with us is stronger than what divides us. On behalf of Africell and the team, it's been an Africell Life by Design. Till we meet again on another edition of the show, stay blessed.